Hey, Joey Starr here. Welcome back to Starr Quality Kitchen. I feel like it's been forever since I touched base on the foods and traditions of my childhood. So today I will show you how I make something that we call Tempero Pronto, which roughly translates into ready seasoning. You may hear some people refer to it as refogado, but my understanding of the distinction between the two is that refogado is prepared for immediate use, while tempero is made to be stored and used for a period of time. Many other cultures have similar items to tempero. Particularly many Hispanic cultures have what they call sofrito. But this recipe is more in the style of Portuguese and Brazilian cuisine, both of which are included in my ancestry. As you may have already guessed by the rough translation of its name, tempero is used as a seasoning, but it's so much more, as it adds an elevated level of flavor to anything that it's used on. My mother used this daily for almost everything that she cooked, from rice to meats and poultries, and even soups and beans. Pretty much any savory dish can benefit from a small portion of Tempero Pronto. One of my goals and underlying themes for this season of Starr Quality Kitchen is to show you how to adopt a cooking style similar to what my mom had tried to teach me. Aside from it being one of the tastiest journeys that you can take, it also pushes you towards that Mediterranean lifestyle that is now finally getting some recognition from the health experts. And the neat thing about the recipes that I will share with you is that most of them are pretty darn easy. They have to be, because believe me, I'm no chef, nor do I pretend to be. So brew some Mache Leon if you have some, and let's get started. By the way, this is a family variation on the traditional recipe for Tempero Pronto, with a possible tweak or two for how I like it. Here's what you will need. 4 large onions. I'm using Vidalia here. Sometimes I use red onion, but pretty much any sweet onion will do if you're going to make it the way my family makes it. Otherwise, it's kind of up to you what onions to use, but I would recommend a sweet onion like this. Besides that, it gives it the flavor that I'm trying to show you. It's also easier on the eyes when you're cutting it up. 2 bulbs of garlic, half a cup of vegetable oil, a bunch of green onions, or scallions, depending where you're buying it from, a bunch of fresh parsley, and a tablespoon of salt. What kind of salt you use, for the most part, doesn't really matter. Mom would always use Morton salt, but honestly, she would use whatever she got her hands on. It's not going to make much of a difference. I'm going to use kosher salt in this case because I happen to have some kosher salt that's been feeling neglected lately, and I don't want to hurt its feelings, so I'm going to use the kosher salt for this particular recipe. You're also going to need a cutting board, a kitchen knife to cut and chop vegetables with, a food processor or a blender. Mom always used a blender. Obviously, a measuring cup will help, which you already saw it, but here it is again with my oil in it. A container for storing your Tempero Pronto. Preferably glass. A mason jar like this one would be perfect, but plastic is okay. Mom used plastic actually quite often to store her tempero, so it's okay to use plastic. In fact, she used this container here that she had brought with her from Brazil one time, so it's perfectly all right to use plastic. I personally feel like the glass keeps the flavor a little pure. When you use the plastic, it's okay, it's fine, no big deal if you don't have glass to store it in, but it's just a little bit better using the glass, particularly a mason jar, because you can seal it airtight with these type of tops. A rubber spatula, or you can use like a stirring spoon or a cooking spoon or a serving spoon. Pretty much anything you can use to transfer the paste that you're going to make in here, to transfer it into here or whatever container you're going to use. The most basic recipe, the bare minimum for making tempero, is to use fresh chopped garlic and salt and mashing it up in a mortar. Kind of like this one right here. This is an authentic mortar. Again, manually imported from Brazil by my mother. And you would use that to make a small portion that you intend to use immediately, aka refogado. First, we're going to peel the garlic and separate it into cloves. There you go, got it all separated into my cloves. Now we're going to chop the rest of our ingredients into larger chunks, except for the green onions. We're going to cut those into smaller pieces, so we'll save those for last. Right now, everything else we're going to cut up into bigger chunks, starting with the onions. Well, it's done. I don't know if you can see this or not. These tears are real. I really didn't want to hurt these poor onions, but I had no choice. The recipe called for it. I really hope they understand. do me a favor. Wash your vegetables before you cut them up and cook with them, especially your greens, your fresh greens, anything fresh. The onions, I guess if you don't, it's not the end of the world because you got to peel off the skin anyway, so whatever nasty crap is on the outside, you kind of toss it away anyway. But your parsley and your green onions and stuff, at the very least, give it a quick rinse before you chop it up. So now, we're gonna take all the ingredients except for my matcha, and we're gonna dump that into the blender. Everything's gonna go into here. I already took the liberty of tossing the parsley in there. So throw our green onions, aka scallions. Put them right in here, right in that blender. Put that right in here. Yeah, it dropped a little bit, but you have to ask yourself this question. If you're cooking and you don't make a mess, did you really cook with love? I don't think so. Drop my garlic in there. Bearing in mind that your parsley is kind of fluffy, so unless you push it down, your blender's gonna look like it's gotten full in 2 seconds, and it's not true. So toss my onions in there. You find yourself running a little low on space in your blender, feel free to put the top on and give it a little pulsation. Toss in my salt, add my oil. I don't really say it that way. I'm just being a wise guy. I know it's oil, just so people I've known in the past called it all. Actually, one of my current friends happens to be from Texas. She says all, and I think it's adorable what she does. I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of my big old vegetables. Verduras, as they say in Portuguese. Give the old chop chop. Start off with slow. Basically, you want to get that bad boy going until you reach the desired consistency. I like mine kind of runny, but just a tad chunky, if you can see that here. Just a tad. See, like that? Almost like an avocado milkshake. You can make yours a little thicker, you can make it a little thinner. Either way, you're going to be good. You're going to have like the flavor that you're looking for. Either way, you should end up with a nice medium green paste here. And when you're making a blender like this, it kind of looks like a lantern, you know? In brightest day, in darkest night, no evil shall escape my... Oh, sorry, it's a food video, my bad. So this is pretty much it, real quick. It smells incredible. There's a nice kind of vegetable-like fragrance that coming from the greens, particularly the parsley you can smell, and the scallions, of course. You can smell a little bit of the onion, of course, because, you know, there's onion in there, obviously. Not a super strong, like, I'm not sitting here like, oh my god, but it's a nice fragrance to it. And if you grew up around this stuff like I have, it's kind of a warming smell because it kind of reminds you of home. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start transferring this to my mason jar, and you end up with a nice full jar of the good stuff ready to go into the fridge, and a little bit left over in the blender. It's alright because it's not going to waste, believe me. After you've made this a few times, you start to get a good idea of what it should taste like after you've whipped up a batch. It's really not that fun to taste. Imagine taking adobo and just sprinkling it directly on your tongue. Adobo. In its purest form, it's a bit salty, but I tell you what, it will provide you with some protection from vampires. One of the benefits of using the vegetable oil is that it prevents the tempero from fermenting and thus avoiding some extra heartburn later. But also that combined with the salt allows for the tempero to last for several weeks in your refrigerator. But I wouldn't really recommend it like longer than a month. If you need it to last longer than that, like I made a big batch and I'm one person, so it's gonna take me longer than 4 weeks to use that. So I'm probably gonna divide some up and put it in the freezer, in which it'll last up to a year. But if you're gonna do that, I recommend maybe dividing it out a little bit to little portions, about a tablespoon or so. A tablespoon if you're gonna make 1 serving of something at a time. Maybe 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons if you're preparing like a big family meal each time you use it. Whatever it is, separate it, pop in the freezer. You're good for the next 12 months. So, let's see here, little, yep, it did come out right. Yeah, really intense if you're gonna try it directly. My recommendation, you really wanna see if you got the goods, let's cook something with it. Alright, so I whipped together something not fancy. I just made some stir-fried beef, with onion and green pepper and tomato, and of course I used my fresh batch of tempero to season this with, and that's all I used. Okay, a little stir fry in the pan, and let's go ahead. First of all, obviously a lot of the aroma I'm getting here is from the vegetables I cooked in here, but there is a bit of that garlic that's from the recipe for the tempero. But really, the proof is in the pudding. Let's give it a taste. First, I'll try some of the green pepper with it. What I like about making a savory dish like this with green pepper is that it tends to soak up some of that seasoning and some of the flavor from the juices of the meat. Give that a shot. Not bad. Not bad. Let's try some of this meat here. I'll just kind of swish it around the sauce a little bit. All right. Nice, decent, medium well slice of thin stir-fry beef here. So basically what's happened here is that the fragrance coming from the garlic and the parsley and the scallions, aka green onion, can be tasted in whatever that is cooked in, of course, as long as it's something that absorbs those type of flavors like red meat would, and of course the green pepper and onion and tomato it does. Now, my version of the tempero is a little lighter on the salt than maybe my mom would use. She didn't use a lot of salt either, but I've been kind of extra conscious lately about the amount of salt and sodium I've been putting into my body as of late, so I decided to go a little lighter than normal. It's really up to your taste. One of the great things about this recipe, in addition that it makes some slam and savory dishes, is that it's very customizable to your taste buds. I'm sure some of you would probably want to triple or quadruple the amount of salt that I put in there. More power to you, that's what you want to do. Or maybe someone makes it my way, might say, you know, Joey's version's pretty good, but I could use a little less salt. By all means, you do you on that. There's no wrong way to make it as long as it tastes good. Again, as I mentioned before, this is a slight variation of my family's recipe, which in turn is a slight variation of the traditional recipes you might find for tempero pronto. However, thinking about it now, I'm not so sure there really is a traditional recipe anymore, because it seems like every family from Portugal and Brazil has their own version of how to make this. I mean, I can definitely say for sure that the flavor profiles for the tempero does seem to vary greatly depending on the region where the recipe came from, particularly in Brazil, because Brazil is such a large country with a large diversity of cultures. I know certain regions, they like their tempero to be spicier, so they'll add things like cumin or cayenne pepper as a big part of it. And in fact, now that you mention it, even the region where my mother's family is from, more often than not, you'll see a tempero recipe where they include a liberal amount of black pepper. So you're gonna get more of a zest to it than the batch that I just made. The batch I made is actually pretty mild in comparison to some of the ones you'll find out there. It's been a while since I've been to South America, but from my times there, I can tell you that in general, especially if you're going out to restaurants, they tend to make things kind of salty. So their version of the tempero is probably gonna be a bit saltier than what you have here. But again, it's customizable. Think of mine as being kind of a baseline of my family's tempero, and then it could be adjusted. Chances are my brothers, they're probably making it saltier than I am, and that's okay. To me, it's just as tasty when I eat it at their home as it is when I make it at my house. So there's really no wrong way to make it, as long as your recipe has garlic, salt, onion, and deliciousness. Thank you so much for watching Star Quality Kitchen. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and stalk. I'll check you later. Da joia!